Okay, good morning, Shavua Tov. This morning, we're doing, as we had mentioned, finally, we had talked about doing this a couple of times, we never got to it. We're finally doing the Psalm for Tuesday, which is number Pei Bet 82. And we have two major problems to try to understand in this morning's poem. The first problem is the last thing we're going to deal with. The first problem is, why is this the Psalm for Tuesday? When you read it, it doesn't seem like it should necessarily be the Psalm for Tuesday. I mean, if I had, if I had chosen, I would have made this the Psalm for either Monday or Thursday, because the topic of the poem, as we're going to see in a minute, is justice. And the 2 days of the week when we really think about justice are really Monday and Thursday, because what happens on Mondays and Thursdays? The court, right? No, not just that we read the Torah. The courts sit. The courts, the Batei Din. So since the Bet Din, the courts, sit on Mondays and Thursdays, I would have made this one of the Psalms for Monday or Thursday, personally. But that's because what do I know? But this is for Tuesday, which goes against what I would have predicted. So that's going to be a problem we're going to deal with in a few minutes. First I want to look at the poem. The other problem we have to discuss right away, and look at the poem. The poem, as you can see, has the word Elokim half a dozen times. And it's not so clear from the poem when the Elokim in the poem is describing Hashem, or when it's sometimes describing the judges. Now we know from Parshat Mishpatim that often the term Elokim is used to mean judges. And we'll talk about why. We'll talk about why as the poem goes on. But so it's like a conundrum, Now I put a dash in every Elokim in the poem, even when they can't all be referring to Hashem. Let's start with the first pasuk. But just one side note before we start. The poem is written by a person named Asaph. Now, Asaph wrote 13 Psalms. He wrote 13 Psalms. He wrote Nun, number 50, and he wrote this and the 11 before it. So there's 12 in a row here from 71 through 82, and then 50. So he writes 13 Psalms. And Asaph, unlike other people whose names pop up in Psalms, is actually mentioned twice in the book of Divrei Hayamim, which in English we call Chronicles. And he's referred to in the book of Chronicles as a helper of David. I have the quote here somewhere. Where did I write it? So that Asaph is mentioned, like I said, in Divrei Yamim, that Divrei Yamim Aleph, he's mentioned the first chapter. He's also mentioned Divrei Yamim Bet in chapter 29. And there his name is connected to David. Together they wrote, apparently, Psalms together. And Asaph is referred to as a chozeh. A chozeh is a visionary. Sometimes the word means a prophet. It's not clear if Asaph was a prophet, although he probably was. He seems to have written with Nevuah, but he was an associate or crony, whatever term you want to use, of David HaMelech, and he perhaps helped David compose some of the Psalms, and there are a few, 13, that are attributed specifically to him. Okay, side issue. Let's get to yes, please. 71 to 82 is 12 poems.
Starts at 73.
73. So that's 11. So, okay, afterward.
73.
That only comes out to 11. It's 13 altogether. I don't know what the other one is. I'll have to. No, 12. He only wrote 12. I wrote it wrong. I said it wrong. He wrote 12. So it's 11 here and then 50. Okay. 11 here and then he wrote 12. 11 here in a row and then he wrote Psalm 50.
Psalm 50?
50. Nun.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to start to read the poem. And the first pasuk right away, is difficult. Okay. Elokim nitzav ba'adat kel, b'kerev Elokim yishpot. Okay. Now, I'm going to assume, like most of the translators, that the first word is God. Okay? God stands in the community, in the congregation, in the gathering of God. God stands in the gathering of God. What does that mean?
He's among them.
But what is it? Well, if God is there, isn't it automatically a gathering of God, right? If God's there, it seems like it. You don't have to repeat that. So,
But it's the purpose of the congregation or the people being there.
right, the people being there are there because Hashem is there, or maybe the people being there brings Hashem, which is the way the Gemara really talks about it. I can't say that you're wrong. But the Gemara in Pirkei Avot specifically talk about if enough people are there, HaKadosh Baruch Hu joins them. So, but either way, Adat Kale probably in our poem means a court, a bet din. However, we take it to mean any gathering of a certain size for the purpose of spirituality. What is that size? You know. 10. The size is 10. And how do we know that an Eidah is 10? We know that from the Meraglim. We know that from the spies. In Bamidbar, in Pasha Shlach, it refers to Adkan ha'edah hara'ah hazot. Until when is this evil community going to exist? So an Eidah means 10. So based upon this, there's a side that's not an issue for a poem, because pshat in a poem, it's a law court. And we're going to return to that in a second. However, based on this, God stands in a community of 10, a minyan. When there's a minyan, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there. And when there's the minyan, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there, and Hashem is standing. What minhag do we learn from this? A very famous minhag. If you're reciting something that can only be recited in a minyan, you should be standing. Not everyone, follows this custom, but that's why you'll see if we stand for Baruch Hu, because you need a minyan to say it. We stand for Kedusha, because you need a minyan to say it. Many people stand for Kaddish for this reason. That not everyone, and I'm not saying you have to, but the minhag of standing for the Devarim Shebekadusha, the things that can only be recited in a minyan, comes from this pasuk. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is standing when joining or visiting a minyan. How much more so we should stand for the things that require a minyan. Now, not everybody agrees, like I said, but that's my minhag. Many yeshivot follow this minhag. Balabatim, it depends on, their community. Sfardim tend to sit if they're not reciting Kaddish. Yekis tend to sit if they're not reciting Kaddish. But the custom of standing is based on this minhag. So let's go back to the poem, though. That's a side issue, but it's interesting. Elokim nitzav ba'adat kel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kaviyachol, is standing when there is a community of God. of something holy, something godly, divine, spiritual going on. Bekerev Elokim Yishpat. Now, I'm sorry?
Judge.
Here, most Meforshim say that this is a reference to the judges. And it's almost like a dream. It's a vision of the way things should be. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to court. And therefore, it's in that midst of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being present, not just the litigants, it's not just the witnesses, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there. And under these circumstances, in this Bekerev, in this milieu, that's when and how the judge should deliver mishpat, yishpot, give justice, will decide justly. It's a beautiful idea. If it were up to me, it would be a requirement for every judge. I don't care whether it's talking about secular judges, or we're talking about religious judges. If it were up to me, judges would be required to read this poem every day before sitting down in court, because it's got this amazing vision in the first pasuk, this amazing vision of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in the courtroom. And there's almost a confusion. Who is God? Who is the judge? In other words, Asaph, our poet, on purpose left a certain, oh, I'm sorry, you can just put it in the back. Shimon just want to throw that stuff in the back. That's my hat. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. The poet, Asaph, is almost like building in a certain amount of confusion. Who's God and who's the judge? The same term is being used because a judge should be godlike. It's correct. What many communities, many civilizations, countries do, when the judge enters, everybody stands. Now, as we're supposed to show tremendous kavod to a judge, because a judge is supposed to be godlike. That's the dream of the poet. That's the dream of the poet. And we have that stated in the first pasuk. The rest of the poem is disappointment. The first two lines, first two verses go together, okay? Ad matai tishbot avel upnei rashaim tisa'u. Selah means that ends the thought. My vision is, I close my eyes. I close my eyes and I imagine that the judge is godlike, dispensing divine justice, and that it's a beautiful situation. However, I open my eyes and I look around and I say, oh my God, how long is this going to go on? What's going to go on? Tishbatu avel. How long is your justice going to be, I'm going to say, corrupt? What other perverse, perhaps? I don't know if other people have other translations. What's he? I'm sorry? Dishonestly.
Lawlessly.
Oh, lawlessly. I'm sorry. Lawlessly. Okay. It's a very long word. But I think it has the idea of corruption. Okay. Avel means perverted. How long? I close my eyes and this is what's supposed to be. Open my eyes. What do I see? And I say, oh my God, how long is this going to go on that the judges act like this? What is the specific form of perversion of justice? Penei rashaim tisa'u. What are they doing? They're recognizing, they're lifting up the faces of the evil. Who are the evil? What are we worried about? that the judges are going to pervert justice because the evil guys have what power over the judges? And it's two things. It's two things. Wealth and power. Wealth and power. The concern is that the Rishaim have something over the judges. Now it could just be power. Now there's the Rishaim are rulers, or they're strong, or they've got a gang, a mob behind them. Okay, or it could be they're just wealthy and they bribe. I like the bribe approach because it fits in to verse Hey when we get there. Okay, it fits in with what we're going to say when we get to verse Hey. So I happen to like the pshat that the Rishaim are bribing them, but it could be just threatening them. It doesn't have to be bribery per se. Okay, so what's going on is the judges are proving themselves to be too weak, which in and of itself is a bit of an oxymoron almost, because what's the word for judges? Judges are gods. If judges are gods, how can it be that they're too weak? In other words, they had the power and they relinquished it. They messed up. What?
Why are judges gods?
Because they dispense God's justice. That's why in Parshat Mishpatim, in Sefer Shemot, it goes through all over and over again. The judges are called Elokim. And the reason for that is that they sit with God. Now, I wasn't going to say this yet, but since you asked that question, I'm going to mention a famous Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, which is, of course, the Sanhedrin is the tractate talking about justice in courts, right? And it says, a judge brings Shekhinah, divine presence, into the world with Mishpat Tzedek. If the judge does Mishpat Tzedek, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shekhinah, divine presence, descends upon us. When the judge is corrupt, Shekhinah mistaleket, the divine presence departs. So there's a tremendous power in the judge. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself wanted us to know that, because that's why the term is used for judges, because they really have that kind of power. And when they don't, number one, realize it, which we're going to come to in the poem, and two, when they don't administer it, it's just a shame. It's a crime. It's a disappointment. It destroys our dream of a just society. It's the saddest. It's a chilul Hashem, right? Okay, it's a desecration of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So now we go on. Now we're going to mention the vision. The first two lines of the poem say, the psalm says, we've got this vision, and it's not being fulfilled. Selah is a punctuation mark ending that thought. Now Asaph comes back and describes to us what the judges are supposed to do. Sheaf to dal viatom. They have to allow there to be justice for the poor and the orphaned. Ani varash, the poverty-stricken and the unfortunate. Hatstiku, they must get tzedek, justice. Does that mean that we should pervert justice on their behalf? No. Verse Gimel is talking about them getting a fair hearing. And historically, if you were poor, orphaned, widowed, I don't know why widow is not mentioned in this list, because traditionally we do put widows in this list, especially when you read Yeshayahu and you read Micha, what we call the later prophets. For some reason, Almanah is missing. Maybe it's because, generally speaking, women didn't come to court It may reflect a reality, a historic reality, that other people represented them. Women didn't come to court. Women weren't allowed to give edut for various reasons, issues that we don't want to discuss here. But I'm trying to explain why perhaps Asaph didn't mention the almanah when all of the other prophets talking about this issue mention almanah. Okay? And perhaps it's because they weren't there in the courtroom. Now, we've got,
able to come to court and not present and sue through the courts in whatever form?
generally not. Generally, women didn't come to the court. The courts were at the gates of the city, and it was a man's world. Women didn't come there. If there was something to be done on behalf of a woman, a man usually brought it up. We see that specifically in the book of Ruth. In Ruth chapter 4, Boaz brings her case to the court. She doesn't come. Boaz brings it. And apparently that was the custom throughout much of Jewish history. And I think Asaph is reflecting that reality. Yes, according to Halach, they can come and present their case. Yes. But apparently historically it didn't happen until modern times. That's a great question, Harry. But I think it's reflecting a reality.
Boaz is not a great example. He was a powerful person. By bringing her case, he could get what he wanted for her. So
No. In terms of his power, I agree with you. That's not the issue. But what we see is Ruth didn't come herself. And that's the only point so that generally speaking, women were not present, which is why I think he doesn't mention almanah in this list where we would have expected to have seen it. That's all. Please.
I'm sure you mentioned this already, but can you just repeat who Asaph was?
Asaph was an associate of David HaMelech. He's mentioned twice in Divrei Yomim as being associated with David, and he wrote 12 Psalms. He was referred to as a chozeh, which means either a prophet or visionary. He was inspired. So we don't know much about him, but he is brought down as an associate of David HaMelech, a contemporary, and worked with David HaMelech in writing Psalms. So the first one is when the poor person. There are three different terms in the verse. There are three different words in the verse for poor people. So there were different levels of poverty, and apparently, dal meant you literally had nothing. Okay, ani was someone whose poverty was enough that they had to cry out, because apparently the word ani is la'anot, to speak, to say something, and rosh is a term that we don't have that often, but seems perhaps a more general term for poor people in that period. So there are many categories of poor people. Now, there are Meforshim that say that the poverty may not have been in money. Poverty may have been in spirit, but that's a drasha. The pshat is they're talking about people who just didn't have, assets. Okay, so what's going on here is when,